Hi everyone, welcome back to Visually Hidden Selects. I'm Peter O'Brien, and today I'd like to talk to you about The Breakfast Club from 1985, written and directed by John Hughes. This was John Hughes' second film as a director, his first being 16 Candles the year before, but he had already written a number of great comedies up to this point. This was really where he found his real voice, was in directing his own films. You know when you're watching a John Hughes film. They have a look and a tone and a rhythm, especially with the comedy and with the presentation. And The Breakfast Club is no different. John Hughes would produce scripts like a bodily function. He would just knock them out over a weekend. The Breakfast Club was written over July 4th and July 5th of 1982, and the original first draft was much larger than what wound up on screen in the film. The film, as it is right now, runs a very lean 97 minutes. Part of John Hughes' approach to filmmaking was to overshoot and then weed it down into a very tight, lean film. Part of that comes from him shooting the script that he wrote, but another part of it comes from the work that he does with the actors while filming. He did encourage his actors to improvise and or modify their dialogue or develop scenes within their characters or take the scene in a different direction depending upon what they felt their character would do. So that adds up to a lot of material. One of the ways the film utilizes a lot of that footage is through montage. There are a few sequences that are composed completely of montage, which is basically a series of shots thrown together to illustrate a scene or a story. Even the opening of the film has a montage of just sights and settings of the school. And through that opening montage, you really get a sense of the kind of story you're about to see, because not only is there a montage with images, but then it's complemented by a narration by one of the main characters, which ties in and bookends the entire film. The basic premise for the film is 5 students are required to spend an entire Saturday in detention for a number of different reasons. Throughout the course of the day, these 5 students, who come from very different backgrounds, they are basically representatives of every high school archetype you could possibly imagine. There's the jock, there's the delinquent, there's the brain, there's the misfit, and there's the popular girl. And throughout the course of the day, they sort of learn quite a bit about not only each other, but themselves. And that's really the key to this film. It is a very atypical teen film in that it doesn't deal with going to a kegger, or losing your virginity, or changing your grades, or cramming for... There's none of that typical teen movie BS. This film is operating at a different level, and I think one of the reasons that it sustains with the audience and that it spans time, because again, this film was made in 1985. You watch it today and it is still relevant, and students in high school perform this as part of their dramatic theater courses now, and they watch it and study it in class. It really speaks to teens in a way that most films don't, because it doesn't talk down to them, and it explores their trials and tribulations from their points of view. The only adults in the film, besides the parents who drop off the kids at the beginning and pick them up at the end of the film, are Carl the janitor, played by John Kapelos, and Mr. Vernon, played by Paul Gleason. This film opens with a quote from the David Bowie song Changes off the 1971 album Hunky Dory. And it's very significant because it fully encapsulates the point of view of these characters, of these students. The quote was actually suggested to John Hughes by Ally Sheedy, who plays Allison in the film. And it also touches on the theme of time and youth and adulthood and the passage of time. There's a great scene between Carl and Mr. Vernon where they're in the records room talking, having a beer, and Mr. Vernon starts to lament about his experiences with the students, his feelings towards them, and Carl points out very clearly that the kids haven't changed. He's changed. cast is listed alphabetically in both the opening and closing credits because it is an ensemble cast. No one character is more significant or important than the other. However, the performances of these characters and the performers behind these characters bring a lot to this film. So much so that during certain points you can see them in different ways. The first half of the film, the character John Bender, played by Judd Nelson, he seems like the antagonist for the film, but it really isn't until he has his clash blowout with Mr. Vernon that you really find out who's the antagonist of these kids. After that point, Bender really kind of starts to work his way into the group dynamic. Funny enough, the role of John Bender was originally going to be played by John Cusack, and sort of at the last minute, he was given the boot and Judd Nelson was brought in to play the part, and honestly, he's one of the strongest points of the film. His performance and his portrayal of the character just brings such an intensity and very strong edge to the character of Bender. This was really kind of a breakout film for all of these actors. About an hour into the film, after the students have bonded and started to break down their social boundaries amongst each other and their different cliques, there's a scene that's a 20-minute scene, and it's one of the reasons I continuously go back and watch this film. It is the most revealing scene within the film. It's where you get a lot of information, not only about them as characters, but their situations and the things that they have to deal with, the pressures that they go through. It is just a very eye-opening scene, and it starts with this incredible monologue delivered by Emilio Estevez's character, Andrew Clark. You don't really think about monologues when it comes to film because that's more of a theater thing, and as I said, this film has been adapted into a stage play. But a monologue is not something that's very common in films. You don't stop everything to listen to a character speak for minutes on end unless it's really significant or they're actually giving a speech of some note, like Charles Chaplin at the end of The Great Dictator, or Captain Quint in the Indianapolis Story. For the most part, a monologue is not something you see every day, and so it really stands out not only as a piece of writing, but as a performance as well. Andrew Clark is the jock. He's the strong one, and he becomes so vulnerable during this point in the film that when his character has his little breakdown, it kind of breaks down all of the other characters as well. And this is pretty much the only time that all five of them are on the same level with the same level of engagement. I think as a filmmaker, the biggest takeaway for me from The Breakfast Club is the writing and the approach to writing, especially an independent filmmaker where you don't always have access to grand set pieces or exotic locations. You know, taking the idea of one setting and keeping it interesting with the characters within that setting. I mean, you've seen it in a number of films over the years, but The Breakfast Club just does it in such a way because the characters are all very relatable. Any person who watches this film can connect with and identify with any one of the characters, either presently or in the past. Everybody is represented in this particular film in some way, shape, or form. And The Breakfast Club really taps into something a little bit deeper that just continues to resonate with audiences. And again, it just comes down to the writing and the insight of John Hughes and his approach. You know, there's a lot of comedy in this film, but it's balanced very well, more so than most of his other films, with drama. So that's it for The Breakfast Club. Again, I really hope you enjoyed this recommendation. If you've seen it before, check it out again. If you haven't seen it, let us know what you think, leave us a comment, and we'll be discussing it at length on the Visually Hidden podcast coming up soon, so be sure to check that out. Until next time, see ya!